All right, let's dive right into this explainer and explore the fascinating mechanics behind behavioral change and adult learning. If you've ever tried to break a deep-seated habit, or if you're just genuinely curious about how people actually transform their lives, you are absolutely in for a treat today. We're going to break down a really incredible set of documented sessions from an adult learning program called ROFA. Specifically, we're looking at a morning session from June 8, 2026, and honestly, what we have here is practically a masterclass in how to make change actually stick.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty mechanics, I want to throw a provocative question your way. Why does inspiration usually fail to create lasting behavioral change? Seriously, think about it for a second. We've all been there, right? We read the motivational books, we watch the incredible speeches online, we get that massive surge of energy to completely overhaul our lives, and yet so often, a week later, we're right back to square one. Why do most self-help programs just fall short of creating real, tangible transformation? Well, the answer lies in the fact that genuine change requires two entirely different engines working together.
And that brings us to what we're calling the binary star system of adult learning. When you analyze the documentation from these ROFA sessions, we get to see two radically different but completely interlocking teachers. You've got Valerie, who runs the 9 a.m. session, and Chris, who takes over at 10 a.m. One is the heart, the other is the head. Valerie's approach is highly pastoral, somatic, and completely identity-driven. Chris, on the other hand, his approach is cognitive behavioral, superstructured, and totally execution-driven. And the magic here is that you don't just pick one over the other. As we'll see, you literally need both.
So let's start with Valerie's 9 a.m. session. If we consider her actual handwritten notes from that day, you see her zeroing in on deeply personal concepts. Words like determined to survive, burden, and gratitude. Valerie teaches inductively. She isn't up there presenting some rigid, bulleted framework. Instead, she teaches by embodying the evidence herself. She uses this incredibly warm pastoral register that just makes the entire room feel intensely safe. Her main goal right out of the gate is to establish the why of change.
And she anchors her entire session in this absolutely incredible core reframe. I'm not a burden, I'm a masterpiece. But here's the thing. She doesn't just hand this quote out like some cheap bumper sticker. She actually earns the room's trust by being incredibly vulnerable about her own severe trauma. She opens up about being born addicted, being sold to the black market, and growing up constantly hearing that she was a problem. That gave her a profound, deep-seated feeling of being a burden. By sharing all of this, she shows everyone in that room that she has paid a very high price for her wisdom. So when she reframes her identity to a masterpiece, the room believes her, because her authority comes directly from her own radical disclosure.
From there, Valerie really solidifies this new identity using these powerful proof-of-concept stories. She talks about volunteering to teach an entrepreneurship class in a prison with literally zero funding. She just asked her students to write a one-page business plan, and one of those very students went on to become a short film producer. Then she shares this deeply emotional story about a mentee who had been waiting 3.5 years in jail for a trial. This mentee wrote a letter using jailhouse toothpaste, sharing that for the first time ever she realized she had worth beyond just having a baby to love her. Valerie mixes these very raw, highly credible stories with famous late bloomer examples, like Colonel Sanders and Warren Buffett finding massive success at age 60. And the takeaway she hammers home is crystal clear. Do not self-limit, because growth is a commitment to be, do, and have the best.
So, by the end of Valerie's hour, the entire identity of the room has shifted. The participants have been given this massive dose of hope. They've found their why. But that brings us to a crucial pivot in this explainer. Because sure, inspiration is incredibly powerful, but what exactly is the next step? Action without a plan is really just an erratic burst of energy, right? Valerie's session leaves the audience deeply moved, but they still desperately need the how. And that is exactly where the 10 a.m. session comes in. Let's shift our energy a bit here, because Chris certainly does. Chris's structured notes are a total 180 from Valerie's. He is deductive, framework first, and highly cognitive behavioral. He walks in with instant street credibility. He even does live physical plank right in front of the class, just to demonstrate physical self-care and maintenance. Basically, Chris provides the rigorous operational scaffolding that takes Valerie's pure inspiration and turns it into real-world execution. Chris immediately grounds the room in what's known as the trans-theoretical model. He explicitly breaks down the 5 stages of change for the class. Stage 1 is pre-contemplation. This is when you're dissatisfied, maybe you're sick of being unhoused or battling addiction, but you're just not quite ready to actually change. Stage 2 is contemplation. Now you recognize the problem and know something has to shift. Stage 3 is preparation, anticipating exactly what you'll need. Stage 4 is action, which is actually working the plan. And finally, Stage 5 is maintenance, doing the daily self-care and making the tiny adjustments needed to keep that change alive.
Now, the absolute crucial point for Chris is right here in Stage 3. He leans on this incredibly sticky phrase he inherited from his father: prepare for everything, worry about nothing. He makes it aggressively clear to everyone in that room that the third stage, preparation, is the absolute linchpin of the entire model. If you try to skip preparation, you are going to fail, period. He uses these great relatable metaphors, like going to the grocery store without a list and ending up walking out with 3 bags of Tootsie Rolls instead of actual food, or ignoring a check engine light until the wheels literally fall off. Preparation is where the real, gritty work of change begins. And to prove just how vital this is, Chris turns a live crisis into curriculum right there in the room. It's a gripping case study. An unhoused peer in their community had been brutally jumped by a group of kids the night before. Now, this peer's immediate, totally understandable instinct was to jump straight into the action phase. He wanted to grab bear spray and retaliate. But instead, he engaged the preparation phase. He hit pause, he called Chris for a second opinion, and together they prepared. They secured the 911 records, they got the hospital reports, and they locked down a witness statement before making a single move. Chris uses this intense, real-time crisis to prove that structured decision-making works even in the most volatile, unfair situations imaginable.
This leads Chris to lay down a really profound rule of accountability when it comes to facilitator ethics. He tells the room, point blank, if I see you're in pre-contemplation and I try to get you into action and you fail, you're not failing. I'm failing you. I mean, wow, that is massive. It's the core principle of meeting people exactly where they are in their current stage of change. Empathy travels, you know? And whether you're a peer, a guide, or a mentor, you simply cannot drag someone through these stages faster than they're ready to go.
Next up, Chris moves the room into this highly interactive decisional balance exercise. He asks the class to weigh the pros and cons of one very simple action: just attending this group today. Now, on the surface, that seems pretty basic, right? But Chris uses this to launch a totally revealing cognitive audit. He challenges the class by asking, are the things you just put in the cons column actually cons?
And here is exactly how Chris reframes their excuses. A student suggests that a con to changing is that, well, it's easier to do nothing. Chris immediately audits this. He says, wait a minute, that is not a con. Easier is just a benefit of staying exactly where you are. A real con has to actually hurt you or make things difficult. Then, someone else suggests that coming to the group brings up trauma and hard feelings. Chris pushes back again. Is that really a bad thing? No, that is actually a huge pro. Working through that trauma and those hard feelings is exactly how you eventually reach peace. He brilliantly forces them to realize that most of their cons are really just them cheating themselves out of change.
So, synthesizing this entire explainer really reveals a complete interlocking map for change. On one side, you have Valerie, the heart. She's inductive, she's testimonial, and she's incredibly pastoral. She gives you the why and fundamentally shifts your identity. And then, right on the other side, you have Chris, the head. He's deductive, framework first, and sharply cognitive behavioral. He gives you the how and ruthlessly drives execution. You do not just pick one over the other. They are two halves of the same whole.
Because, honestly, the hard truth is this: action without identity is totally hollow. Think about it. If Chris gives you all the steps, but you still deep down believe you're a burden, you're eventually going to self-sabotage. But on the flip side, inspiration without a plan is completely empty. If Valerie convinces you that you are a masterpiece, but you don't actually prepare a framework for your week, that motivation is going to vanish by Tuesday. True, lasting transformation absolutely requires the dual engine of both Valerie's pastoral hope and Chris's rigorous logic. Which leaves us with one final, very real thought to close out this explainer. Taking Chris's behavioral framework and combining it with Valerie's unshakable belief that you are fundamentally worthy of growth, I'm going to turn it over to you. What will you prepare for this week? Not what will you just think about, and not what erratic, impulsive action will you take, but what will you genuinely prepare for? Take that next step. We'll see you in the next explainer.